Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 429 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have this small crew here this week. Crim on his way back from Command Fest Richmond, I believe, so he's probably up in the air right now. So it's just me and the owner of MTG Goldfish this week, Richard. How are you doing today, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. Excited to talk about our topic today.
Yeah, we have a fun topic for today. So we're trying to think of like what we want to talk about. There wasn't a ton of like big news in Magic. Everyone's doing Command Fest and pre-releasing. March of the Machines, they had early access day, but it doesn't actually come out until tomorrow. So we figured next week we'll talk about, new cards and experiences with that. So we were trying to find a topic, and we've had one that we've been discussing for a while, and it just haven't found the right time, but we're going to get to it today, and that is cards that used to be good, most specifically in Modern. Modern has underwent a huge upheaval over the last few years with Modern Horizons, really powerful standard sets, and there's a pretty big list of cards I would consider like iconic and former staples that just don't really show up like they used to. So we want to talk about
Seth, I thought we were doing the history of Jund. You sent me the spreadsheet and I put it on there were so many Jund cards. I thought we were doing the history of Jund. What is this?
It's honestly the same thing, right? Like cards that used to be good, history of Jund, same thing really. But yeah, I'm curious. We're going to talk about this, but I'm really curious why some of these cards that used to be among the most played in the Modern format really just don't show up anymore. So that's our big topic for today. Also want to mention a little bit about serialized cards. There was a little bit of controversy surrounding some Ragavans, serialized Ragavans. So we wanted to mention that, and then we're going to talk a bunch of cards that used to be good in Modern. Before we get into it though, if you have some cards that used to be good in Modern and you don't need them anymore, we've got a great solution for you, because our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you're tired of all the hassles that go into buy listing, Card Conduit lets you skip them with their curated service. You can send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a little work, you can use this sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. And no matter which one you choose, you're going to get a detailed report with your results in a fast payment once your order is processed, and you even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So before we get into cards that used to be good in Modern, Richard, there's a bit of a hubbub this week about serialized cards, specifically serialized Ragavan. What is the news with these serialized cards?
All right, so apparently SCG opened serialized Ragavan. I think it was one, right? Like one of 500.
I think it was one of one, yeah. Or one of 500, yeah.
And I don't know, people got upset. So there are some people in the camp of SCG is like in bed with WotC, and they got preferential treatment in which they were given like the valuable serialized cards. That one, I don't know, it's kind of a hot take, but a lot of people were on that bandwagon. And then the other take is like it removes the thrill of opening packs, because you now know that Ragavan 1 of 500 is off the table. And then people are like, well, what did you expect, right? If stores open like 95% of packs, all the stores are going to open the things. It's not a scam, but also like all the highly collectible cards are going to end up in the hands of store owners, right? And not just store owners, not your local LGS probably isn't getting it, right? It's probably these like huge, like, SCG, huge eBay sellers, huge, online sellers like Card Kingdom, stuff like that, where they open like cases and cases of product. They will most likely get these serialized cards. So knowing that, are serialized cards still exciting and worth it?
But like, doesn't that apply to whatever, like Phyrexian Elishnorn or any other fancy card that's going to come in booster pack? Like whoever opens the most boosters is going to have the greatest chance of getting the really good ones. Like, isn't that just like how boosters work and have always worked? Like
now but now you can't open Ragavan anymore, right? There's always that hope that you open that pack and you get 1 of 500. I guess you could still go for 500 of 500 or 69 of 500 or whatever the hot number is, right? 420. But it's off the table. Like if if the 4 most desirable Ragavons are displayed on the SCG Twitter, are you still happy to open collector boosters? If you know the chase cards are gone, and like if you know the Powerball lottery winner has been pre-decided, and at most you can win like $100 or something from the lottery, would you still be entering? Like, I mean, think that there is some merit to that argument that the thrill is kind of gone, right?
I mean, I think it applies more to the One Ring, in my opinion. Like, yes. So yes, one of 500 Ragavan, the number one is probably the most valuable, or one of the most valuable. So yes, the single highest value card is going to be gone, but there's still 499 other Ragavans and a bunch of other serialized cards that are worth $1,000, a few $1,000. So there's still a lot of hits. I've heard speculation about the Lord of the Rings set that we're going to see booster prices right now are really high, but that booster prices are going to stay high until someone opens the One Ring, and then we're going to see the price crater on booster packs. So I think there's some truth to it, although I would say it's more of a concern with a literal 1/1 card. Like if someone cracks a 1/1 One Ring on release weekend, I think you're going to see like a lot of hype for opening packs of that set die. The 1/1 Ragavan, because it's 1 of 500, or number 1 Ragavan because it's 1 of 500, that I don't think it's actually that big of a deal.
All right, let's talk business strategy, Seth. Say you're SCG and you open the One Ring. Do you post on Twitter that you open the One Ring and you're taking bids and whatever, you try to sell it, or do you seal it away in the SCG vault and pretend nothing happened and keep merely selling your collector boosters? What do you think actually happens here?
I think the correct thing to do from SCG's perspective, or whoever, big vendor that opens it perspective, would be to wait. Like there was even some of the offers that came out for the One Ring with people offering like $100K on the condition that you don't tell anyone that you opened it. Like some of the offers that are standing for it are already like that. So I would say that wouldn't the most value be to like wait another month or something? Like eventually you're going to be able to hype the One Ring and sell it for a ton of money, but wouldn't it be better to sell a bunch more collector boosters for people chasing? Like
so
I don't know
slimy,
if that's
Seth.
I don't know if that's ethical.
I know everyone's just acting in their best interest, but can you imagine everyone just opening packs with the hopes of the One Ring while all the time like Marl has it in his suitcase because he went to pre-release and opened it, and he's just hiding it from the rest of the world? Like, isn't that? Oh, that feels a little wrong, right? If someone is just hiding it, and I don't know, everyone's getting their hopes up for the One Ring, and everyone's like, "Oh no, the One Ring is lost." And I'm sure we'll start like some kind of Kickstarter to try to raise money to find the One Ring or something. Like, I'm sure people will get upset if after a while the One Ring is not found.
Yeah, no, it does kind of feel scummy. Although I would say like, yeah, it does feel scummy. Although the odds of opening are so low, like from a statistical perspective, it's like, I don't know. Does it?
At least the lottery has the respect to be like, look, there's a winner. you know the lottery's over. What if the lottery was over like 6 months ago, but everyone keeps buying tickets, right? Like that's...
I mean, that's a real concern. Even discounting someone trying to manipulate the market that way, like someone opening it and hiding it, there's a chance someone cracks it in a fat pack that they bought at Walmart and they can't read it and they throw it away, or they stick it in, their rubber band wrapped pile of Magic cards that's their collection, and they just don't know that it's a $100,000 card or whatever. So that could happen accidentally too, right? Isn't there some percent chance that like...
It's like winning the lottery, right? Like you don't really want to broadcast to the world that you're now in possession of this.
Yeah.
I don't know what, like $300,000, like whatever, right? Like it's literally one in the world. You don't want people to know that. What if like someone knows you and they jump you in the parking lot, right? Or, the classic, your friends and family come and ask for a little loan. Like I got this cool spec on this upcoming mythic rare, just give me 1,000, I'll give you 2,000 back next week. You just opened the One Ring, you can do it, right? Like, so usually it's in your best interest to keep quiet about it, right? Or try to sell it anonymously or something. I don't know. It's like with the One Ring, it just brings all this weirdness to the game.
I mean, isn't that kind of flavorful though? From the little bit I know about Lord of the Rings, is Army living out the novel sort of?
I mean, I think if everyone starts a Kickstarter to find the One Ring, and then the one person that has it slowly becomes more corrupt over time.
Oh, well, yeah, it'll be interesting. These serialized cards are so new that I think we're just figuring out all the ramifications and the upsides and the downsides. I know if I open it, it would be on my Twitter right away. Hopefully it'll be on a video. But
list like the top 5 biggest card vendors. They meet in a shady room in Vegas, okay? Like Card Kingdom, TCG player, SCG, and they're like, we all chip in like $100,000, buy the one ring, we make a trip to Mordor, and then destroy it and tell nobody. And then we will keep selling collector boosters until the end of time, right? Like, if we track the price history of sealed product, you have to imagine that once the one ring is revealed, like the product will drop? Or do we think everyone is actually sane about this and says, the chance of opening is very low. It has actually very little impact to box EV. Like, don't worry about it. Or do you think we'll see the price nosedive as soon as the one ring is revealed?
I mean, I don't think it's going to go from whatever, 300 a box to 150 a box or something, but I do think it'll slow down. I think there will be some people that just want the thrill of it. Like, it is like buying a lottery ticket, and some people really like that experience. So I do think that it could definitely have an impact on the prices of the boxes. I also wonder, like, do you think Wizards will put it in the first print run intentionally to get it out there? Because I think Wizards has some control over that. Remember, like, original Zendikar with the whatever they were called? No. That were only in the first print run. And then if you bought, like, a box that was printed 6 months later in the second or third print run, you didn't have a chance of getting those cards. So do you think they'll intend...
Because
I would assume,
the second
like,
and third
how else do you control
guaranteed.
It? Right. So I assume it would have to be in the first print run, which means... in theory, someone should open it fairly quickly, I guess, if the set sells well.
What if they're scummy and put it in the third print run? And like everyone who bought the boxes early actually have zero chance of getting. We need the gambling commission or something.
Yeah.
Audit. You know how they audit like slot machines and stuff to make sure they're fair and like nothing. Although I don't even believe that, because after watching Seth play slot machines, they're a big scam anyway. But we need someone to make sure there's actually a one ring here. What if there's no one ring? Or what if there's a misprint? What if they put 2 one rings in? What would that do?
I mean, do you think they have a pile of one rings that they're going to make a video of them shredding to prove that they are in the wild? Like the 1 of 2 or 2 of 1 ring, like
I can see them screwing it up and like adding like the one ring sheet into like March of the Machine or something. And then you're like, wait a minute. They've done it before.
Yeah. The worst case is if a WotC employee opens it, because that, even though like, the conspiracy theories would just go so wild. Like, the appearance would be bad. Like, similar to where we started with this, with the SCG thing. Like, people don't like the perception of, like, this big vendor being the one that gets the most valuable card in the set. That would be twice as bad, 5 times as bad, if it's, like, Marrow or some WotC employee who just, like, goes to pre-release and cracks a booster and gets it. No one is gonna let them live that down. So hopefully...
You know how they used to crack a pack on the WotC stream? It'd be funny. Like, oh, let's crack a pack. Oh, the one ring. Oh, what a coincidence.
Yeah, Gavin opens it in a short on his YouTube channel before the set even releases, just cracking some packs. Anyway, let us know what you think about all the one ring drama. But I would say, mathematically, SCG opens way more packs than anyone realizes, and if you open a lot of packs, you're going to open the good cards at some point. So I think that's actually, oh boy, we're going way too deep in this, but I think it's gotten worse. I saw someone posting some finance stats about serialized cards that they make up about 20% of the value of the EV of a collector booster. So that's a big chunk of value that's being dedicated to cards that you're not going to open very consistently. So I think for the average person, cracking collector boosters has gotten less valuable, because any average collector booster, even box, you're not likely to get one of these serialized cards. But it's fine for the big vendors, because they're going to hit them eventually. If you open, 10,000 boxes, it's going to even out in the end. So I almost think it's made box opening worse for players. But then on the other hand, it hopefully will keep making the base cards cheaper for players, so maybe that's a worthy trade-off. But
this sounds so bad, because right now, remember at Vegas, we were actually trying to research how slot machines, like the EV or something, is like. It's actually supposed to be pretty close to break even, but like I just watched Seth like lose so much money. I'm like, how, you know? And then we had to like actually delve into the math and figure it out. But
yeah,
this sounds like it. Like the EV may be positive, but the variance is so high. Like everyone loses money, and then one person wins like 10 million. And then the EV averages out. That's kind of serialized cards, right?
Or the lottery or slot machines or any any form of gambling for that reason. But anyway, that's serialized cards. Let's talk. I'm really interested in this topic. So let's delve deep into cards that used to be good in Modern. And we're not just going to be reading off a list of these cards. I'm actually curious. I want to know why have these cards fallen so far from their peak? So Modern's like a decade old now, I think, roughly a decade old. And let's start with a big one, Richard. This is a card. So as I was researching for this episode, there's a cool little trick at mtggoldfish.com. You can go to the card page and see popular cards and staples for any format. So I went to that for Modern, and then I stuck it in the Wayback Machine. So you can go all the way back to like 2013 and see like the most played creatures in Modern in 2014 or 2015 with the help of the Wayback Machine. Snapcaster Mage, you don't see it at all anymore. It is completely gone. But if you go back from like 2014 to 2017, this was one of the top 10 and often the number one most played creature in the entire format. It was a true staple of the format. Richard, what happened to Snapcaster?
I don't know. I don't know what happened to Snapcaster, but I think it's something to do with card redundancy is super high. And also a 2/1 body does literally nothing nowadays. So there was a time where I'm sure Crim could tell you this, but Snapcaster beats were a real thing. Like you can grind someone down and just kill them with Snapcaster Mages. That is laughably not effective today. And then also Snapcaster lets you reuse your best cards. But as Yorion showed us, like our card pool is so deep now that you don't actually need to do that. For the price of 2 mana, you just play all the good cards and just play them on curve and call it a day. Splinter Twin dying probably has something to do with this year. Splinter Twin was a very popular home for this. I don't know. Ponder being banned at some point probably mattered because when you snap Serum Visions nowadays, or you snap Remand. Like Remand's also on our list of cards that we don't play anymore. Like there's just no... I
think like so then you also other considerations I would say would be like, and I guess this applies to all of them, but just like general power creep in the sense that like there's just way more options now. Some of the decks that in the past would want Snapcaster, now you have Dragon Rage Channeler and Ledger Shredder and all these cards that are also in the conversation. You have stuff like, is it Murktide? Seems like one of the most obvious styles of decks, like the control tempo-y spell heavy deck. But then you have stuff like Murktide itself that's taxing your graveyard. So like you're using your graveyard in other ways and trying to exile it rather than leave cards there. And then the other home where Snapcaster was really good was like just straight blue-white control decks. That's where you had the like this Snapcaster beat plan. And in those decks, I wonder, do you think that Companions sort of killed it as well? Because a lot of those decks are Kahira decks. Is the trade-off like, I would rather have Kahira as a free extra card in my companion zone than have access to Snapcaster in my control deck?
No, I think those decks got rid of Snapcaster. They're just like, we'll just throw Kahira for free, right? I don't think that's the trade-off that was being made. I think the 2/1 just doesn't cut it. You're paying 2 mana for this. Like you don't... Modern's so much more efficient now that you're paying 2 extra mana for no reason. The 2/1 really doesn't make it. Like, I mean, there's other cards here that I guess we didn't... It's not on the list, but Cryptic Command. You remember the good old Cryptic Command Snapcaster loops? Like, these things are not playable. Like, the Snapcaster support cards are not playable anymore. And the graveyard taxing is a real thing. So, do you think Snapcaster will ever return? Like, is there a world where Snapcaster comes back? Is this just a temporary metagame shift, or is this card just needs some Modern Horizons 3 power creep? You know, it needs to make a treasure when it ETBs or something.
It's been a while now. It's not like this is a new thing. Snapcaster, I think it probably peaked in like 2016, 2017. So we're talking like 5 years ago now. I don't think it's coming back, sadly. Like, it's not that it's a bad card. Like, if you're playing a deck with a lot of spells, you could throw Snapcaster in it, and it's, I don't think, going to embarrass you, but I don't think we're ever going back to the good old days. I was actually, like, for a completely unrelated debate about Deathrite Shaman and whether it should be unbanned in Modern, I went back and I looked at right before Deathrite was banned, which was February 2014. I was looking at the metagame and the decks that existed then, and they're so quaint. Like, Jeskai Control was one of the 3 most played decks, and it's like Snapcaster Mage, Electrolyze, Think Twice, Sphinx's Revelation, Johnny Vengeant, Gideon Jura. It's like, yeah, this is like cards that you wouldn't see playing Standard today, barely. And these were like modern staples. So I think the format's just passed Snapcaster by. So I don't have high hopes. Like, in Modern today, your turn 3, you're like Snapcaster, Flashback My Consider or something. Your opponent's like make 2 4/4 rhinos or Living End You or Primeval Titan. Like, it just doesn't match up to the power level of the format, I don't think.
I can see Snapcaster making a comeback if they print a broken 1 mana. I lied, no. So, like, let's say like Veil of Summer or whatever, right? Like, if it's like so powerful that you're like, okay, I play it on 1 and then I Snapcaster it back on 3, and it's so much like if Ragavan was a spell, right? If it was so much above curve compared to everything else, you would play this like subpar card just to get more of it, to get basically 8 of that card. But I don't think Wizards would print something so ridiculously broken that you feel the need to Snapcaster it back.
So, like,
and then would you cast like Mission Briefing or something at that point? Like, there's some other stuff that does Snapcaster things, right? Would you just use that? I don't know.
I mean, I think Snapcaster's the best Snapcaster still. I don't think it's been surpassed by like Mission Briefing.
Isn't that Surveil right 2 or something? What is that? I don't even know what it does.
I think it does Surveil 2, and then you can Snapcaster. It is instant speed. Well, maybe it's better.
What's this 2/1 body going to do?
Like, if they put Ancestral Recall, like if they literally got rid of the reserve list and put that in Modern, then sure, Snapcaster could probably do something. But barring something like that, I would be surprised. So, Richard, what's next on our cards that used to be good list? Give us your first pick.
All right, Path to Exile. I want to say I've always thought Path to Exile was bad, but now it's like super confirmed. Who used to play this? Fable, Blue-White Control,
like everyone. If you go back to this, was like 2014, 2015, Lightning Bolt, Path to Exile, 2 of the top like 3 Thoughtseize. Those were like the top 3 spells played across the format. What were the white decks
back then? Like some kind of like green-white pod type deck.
Yeah, so you'd have pods type decks. You'd have the control decks like Jeskai Control, Blue-White Control. I'm trying to think. Hate Bears and Taxes were still like a deck at that point.
Mardu decks.
Yeah.
Lingering Souls, I mean, basically, decks, which is another meme. They would play.
I miss Lingering Souls. Basically, if you had white mana, you were playing. Zoo decks played it. Geistesine Trap decks used to play it. Like Soul Sisters.
Zoo used to play. Like that was like a real deck. I mean, the Soul Sisters really count.
Yeah, I mean, it was better at some points back when you could like Spectral Procession with a straight face and like gain 3 life off of your Soul Sisters. Look out, metagame. I mean, so Path was always bad, right? Like, I don't know if I realized it at the time, but when I look at it now, it's pretty clear that like Path always kind of sucked, but we just didn't have other good removal options, so you played it anyway because you just like, what else am I gonna do? But now that we have March of Otherworldly Light, Prismatic Ending, Solitude, Leyline Binding, like this huge list of spells that don't give your opponent a land,
I mean, I think Fatal Push is what did it in. So Fatal Push was the other 1 mana removal spell that was actually very easily accepted. You just play black, like you don't have to have a 5 color mana base like Leyline Binding. But
and then
Path
Unholy
had its purpose, right? Like you gave the land, but if you were playing Blue-White Control, you're like, whatever. Like, you know, if you're not killing me instantly, like I give you the land, and then my end game is so much more powerful. Or like Burn could play Path to Exile because they're like, take the land, I'm just gonna burn you out anyway. It's fine. With our kind of grindy mid-range Modern now, like the land, like that's just like a death sentence here. like you give someone an extra land, like that's really bad right now.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's probably worse now than it was then, right? Like rampant growthing your opponent, I think, is probably more painful in the current meta than it was in the 2015 meta. Everything is just like so sped up compared to where it used to be a while ago, that giving your opponent, like, especially if you have to use it early, like Ragavan, for example, is one of those cards where you have to really kill it on turn 1 or it's going to snowball. But if you path the Ragavan on turn 1, then you're kind of doing half of Ragavan's job anyway. Yeah, like, so it just doesn't work out in the end. But I mean, I'm glad we had better options. There was a while where we were complaining about, like, where's the good removal? Maybe it's went too far now.
On this list, we have a lot of, like, vanilla creatures or just, like, creatures that are meant to be beaters that are now extinct because everything dies to Doomblade, which is, like, Fatal Push or Leyline Binding or Unholy Heat, the greatest, like, travesty of them all. Like, your creatures need to be super OP to overcome that 1-mana removal spell, right?
Do you think it's the removal spell that has that impact, or do you think it's the speed and power of, like, the combo and pseudo combo decks in the format? Like, let's go to your best friend Tarmogoyf, which still shows up a little bit, but isn't where it used to be. Is Tarmogoyf bad now because it gets killed too much, or is it bad now because you're facing down 2 Crashing Footfall Rhinos on turn 3, or a huge Hammer Time creature on turn 3, or a Primeval Titan on turn 3? Like, do you think it's the removal killing it, or is it just metagame shifts and overall, like, speed of the format that's a problem?
Both. So there was a time where, so maybe if you play another creature deck, right, you might have troubles. Like, they play Murktide, but even if I play a totally unfair deck, Tarmogoyf does nothing, because they just snap off a 1-mana Fatal Push or something, or a Leyline Binding, and they're good to go, right? They traded up in mana, I didn't deal enough damage, and that was that. So it's not just like it's being power crept by creatures, like I can't get through. It's like mana inefficient, right? And then it also doesn't kill people fast enough. Before, winning by turn 4 or 5 was, like, acceptable. Like, you could, like, hit them with a couple Tarmogoyfs. Now that's not acceptable. Like, people are much faster than you, so I think it's both. But I think, like, the reason Murktide exists is because removal is so efficient. Like, Wizards power crept creatures because removal got more efficient, and then once the creatures got so power crept, they're like, oh my god, we got to get some more removal here, and then they power creep the removal again. And what happens is old creatures just will never see the light of day ever again. Tarmogoyf grows with every set. If there's a battle deck in Modern, watch out, because, Tarmogoyf is slowly creeping up. Tarmogoyf used to be a 4-5 standard. Right now, it's like 6-7. So it's, like, slowly getting there. It might eventually be a Murktide one day, but it's slowly getting there.
If you can get it to the point where it consistently dodges Unholy Heat, that would actually be kind of relevant. Like, if you actually are regularly getting it to 7 toughness, I think the removal is definitely part of it. Like, I think that's another huge shift if you look at old Modern decks compared to new Modern decks. There was a ton of removal. Like, Jund in the good old days of 2014, they played a million removal spells, but they were playing, like, Maelstrom Pulse and Abrupt Decay. In losing your Tarmogoyf to a 2 or 3 mana removal spell, that's kind of fine. Like, efficiency wise, like, you're breaking even, maybe even trading up in mana if your opponent has to spend a Maelstrom Pulse on it. But now pretty much every deck is going to have a 1 mana way. Either can just ignore Tarmogoyf because they're going to combo, or they have a Fatal Push or Unholy Heat, 1 mana way to deal with it. So I think that's definitely hurt it. And we've seen, like, more and more of the format focus on 1-drops, like Ragavans, Dragon Rage Channelers, Giver of Runes. Like, I think in part because of that. If your 1-drop trades with the removal, you're kind of okay with that, but it makes it much harder to play 2 and 3 drops that die to that same removal spell, just because the tempo lost there.
No one plays any, like, real 3-drops as a creature, because if someone trades with 1 mana, it's, like, disgusting. You play, like, utility 2-drops, like Ledger Shredder and stuff like that, because you just hope they, like, actually just win the game, and, like, 1 mana down is not too bad. But yeah, like, imagine you play like Grave Titan or something, they Unholy Heat it. You're okay, you got 2 zombies, right?
That's so brutal. Oh, all right. I gotta ask you about this one, Richard. You put this one on the list with a question mark, which is Blood Moon. So this one, I'm not sure, like, is Blood Moon worse than it used to be? I would say yes. But is it bad? I don't know. I don't know if I would consider it bad. People still do play it and it serves a purpose. But as a Blood Moon aficionado, I would say the big issue here is it's just way easier to kill. Beseiju is probably the deal breaker there, but there's so many ways. And this is really interesting. I think part of it also ties to like Wizards wanting to make flexible cards for best of one play. So there's a lot of cards that just like accidentally are good cards that have blow up an enchantment like sort of stapled onto that. So I think that flexibility that we see with cards like Beseiju and these like best of one design cards, I think it really does hurt Blood Moon. It still does something unique though, and there's still times where Blood Moon is your savior and does come down and like, it's not going to hardlock your opponent like it used to in the mono red prison days, but it can buy you enough time that if you have a clock, maybe you can slow your opponent down well enough. So what do you think? Is Blood Moon just straight up bad now?
Like you said, there is some purpose to it, but I think it's significantly worse than what it used to be. So you mentioned people like having incidental removal and Boseiju. There's things like Abrupt Decay was printed at some point that also dealt with this, but Ren in 6 is a big deal. The Ren in 6 allows you to just fetch out your basics like very easily. Mm-hmm. So you can play around this. Abundant Growth, which I guess is a metagame call because that thing's been around forever. Like there was a time before Leyline Binding where you would not bring in Blood Moon against the 5-color deck because you're like, it does nothing. And you're like, how is this right? That seems absolutely incorrect, right? But with Abundant Growth and Ren in 6, Omnath decks didn't care about this. But with Leyline Binding, suddenly this mattered again. So like it kind of came in fashion again. But it's just a lot worse. Remember the good old days where you just play Blood Moon and you win the game? Like,
yeah,
doesn't happen, right? This is like disruption. You get like 1 or 2 more turns to do something if you're lucky. But the fact that combo decks and stuff don't need to play anything, they're just like, I have green in my deck, I have Boseiju, I don't actually need to do anything against Blood Moon. I'm protected against Blood Moon already. I just fetch smartly and then I'm good to go. Kind of ruined free win red, I guess. Right? It's no longer free. You gotta sweat out the wins now.
Yeah, if it even is a win in the end. Yeah, but yes, Free Moon Red is super dead. I think it's really interesting. In some ways, Blood Moon has gotten more important. I think that one of the reasons people still play it is like Urza's Saga came around, and Blood Moon's like a really clean answer to Urza's Saga, one of the best cards in the format. But at the same time, it has just gotten so much more temporary and so much worse. It's almost like a sorcery now or something that like does its Blood Moon thing for a couple of turns, whether or not that actually is enough. But yeah, the days of Blood Moon being a win con where you just slam this and like watch your opponent cry and then scoop 10 turns later when they can't actually do anything, those days are like sadly super long gone. Speaking of land destruction, what about Fulminator Mage, Richard? That was one that I kind of forgot how heavily played this card was when I was going back through the Wayback Machine stuff. This was a top 10 creature, like, for a couple of years. I think it... Do you remember the good old days where, like, Tron was, like, super good? Yeah. So you'd try to, like, Fulminator Mage them and then surgical extraction the Tron land and, like, haha, you're never casting that card.
So Tron needed to be good. Field of Ruin... also did this in, so yeah. Having a 2/2 creature is irrelevant. Like, this used to be your win you're like, I play this, and if I don't have a land to blow up, I just beat them down. And then and then there was the dream of recurring this, so you can play this, recur it with like Liliana Lost Hope or whatever, and
Kolaghan's Command,
yeah. So there are ways to abuse this, but this was dependent on Tron being good and also Tron not killing you immediately. So you had to be on the play to get this done, and then on the draw you would hope whatever comes down doesn't murder you. This is never coming back, right? Like we have Field of Ruin, we have for land destruction?
The other really big one was, I think, Cleansing Wildfire that is like only 2 mana plus people use it on their own land sometimes. So I think we've gotten better options. Even Beseiju, like like you said, play draw is really huge against Tron if you're trying to interact with a 3-drop. Same with Blood Moon. Like, you run into the same problem with Blood Moon. Like, the Karn can already be on the battlefield by the time you can resolve a Blood Moon if you're on the draw. So now we just have many more 2-mana options that are going to be fast enough. Plus, Tron isn't exactly what it's used to be. And also, like, I think you lose some value in non-Tron matchups when sometimes you would just bring it in against, like, a random mid-ranger control deck, and like, I'm gonna get your creature lands and I'm gonna slow you down. But with Ren and 6 running around, like, that plan has gotten so much worse because so many of those decks are just they're just gonna get those.
We used to be dominated by Celestial Colonnades and
that was a real threat. That was a real threat.
That was the finisher, right? We also have what's the 1-mana Alpine Moon. We have Assassin's Trophy, which also gets rid, and then Boseiju. So you have a lot of land hate you can play, but it was really for Colonnade, right? Like that was like one of the big ones that people don't play anymore.
Colonnade plus Snapcaster, that was like the control win con of 2015. Those were the threats that were going to get you. Speaking of Tron, we just have Tron period on our list of cards that used to be good, even though it's not technically a card. What do you think the problem with Tron is these days? So in defense of Tron, if you go on the metagame page, it's still there as like a 3rd tier archetype. So it's not that it's like completely disappeared, but it used to be a solid top tier archetype for years and years. Tron was always one of those decks that was always good, always near the top of the meta. What happened to Tron? Is the format just like too fast? Is it all the new land destruction we're talking about? If Blood Moon is bad and Fulminator is bad, shouldn't Tron be good? Because those are the cards that hate on Tron. Like, what do you think happened to the big mana deck?
I don't know what happened to Tron. Like, all the decks are fair mid-rangey decks kind of now, right? And then some fast combo decks, but they're all kind of grindy. Isn't this where Tron should shine? Like, why does Tron suck?
Yeah, so my theory is that more decks do things on turn 3 now than they used to. Like, in a turn 4 world, a turn 3 Karn's pretty good. In a turn 3 world where everyone's trying to do their big thing on turn 3, it's less impressive, I guess. I don't know. This one actually
you, right? Like, what is Rhinos? They're like, here's 2 Rhinos. You're like, Karn, Ulamog, like, you're dead, right? So it's got to be they just Boseiju you for fun, and then that's it. Like, you can't get anything done. Or like I think that just counters your one thing and like smacks you twice and you're dead. Or maybe Ragavan. Maybe you don't have room for turn 1 interaction, so Ragavan just runs you over.
Yeah, that's true. Ragavan.
You're like Chromatic Spear. You're like, cool, treasure. I have more mana than you. You're dead. Like, I don't know.
Ragavan casts your Karn. They just steal it and cast it. Yeah, that is. I mean, it's got to be, I bet, a combination of those things. Like, we were just talking about better 2-mana land hate. So now the hope of your opponent not being able to interact in time is much less likely to be realized. So better land hate, faster meta, no early interaction, which definitely leaves you susceptible to getting run over by a Ragavan or threats like that. So maybe if you add all those small things together, that's what just knocked Tron down a bunch of tiers in the meta.
What does Archon of Cruelty actually say? Does it make you sack a Planeswalker? what does it actually... It makes you sack a creature, right? It kills Ulamog, if that's your only thing, right? But does it kill card?
Creature or Planeswalker, so it does, that probably hurts as well.
Help you at all? Probably more Planeswalker removal as well. We have like just straight up Planeswalker removal, so even if you resolve a Karn, you're like, cool, take my thing, I'll remove it.
Ooh, wow. Okay, so I got another one. Since we're talking about decks that have disappeared, what about Storm? Like, do you remember the glory days of Storm where that was like Finkel at Pro Tours, like always top 8ing? Like, that was a real deck. We have Goblin Electromancer specifically on the list, but really, that is highlighting the Storm archetype, and that one is really dead. Like, Tron might be struggling around at tier 3, but showing up on occasion. I haven't played against a traditional Storm deck in like a year or something. And you would think, like, it's a relatively fast combo deck. It can win on turn 3. Like, it should be able to keep up your opponent Rhinos, and you're just like, haha, whatever, combo off, Storm ya. Like, what's the Storm problem?
My favorite post on Reddit of all time was like this post where they're like, I fixed Storm. And it's like this like huge document of like 20 steps, and like each step they make like a 1 card substitution that like makes total sense. Like, oh, we play Serum Visions instead of this, and blah blah blah. And they're just slowly building. Is it Murktide? And like every like every substitution made a lot of. If you're just reading it, you're like, oh yeah, this is like very good, right? You're like, oh yeah, this makes sense. But it's like a troll post. So you end up in Is it Murktide? The problem is you got to land Electromancer, and I think that's very difficult. And
Yeah.
it's probably more efficient to win with other stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that needs to go right for Storm to win. Like you could do that, or you could just like creativity and win. Like I don't know, right? Like do you need to set up all these pieces?
There's risk, right? Like you need your graveyard active most of the time. You need to untap typically with an Electromancer or Baral, which that also circles back around to our conversation about way more removal. Like there's a lot more 1-mana removal seeing play, so the odds of it living is going to be a lot less. Yeah, I think it's just hard mode. Like you can definitely still combo off, but why combo off if you can get, a more or less free win with a 8/8 Murktide coming down early, or, putting a bunch of Archons into play with creativity. So I think that must be the reason.
So we don't have any pure combo decks anymore. Like the glass can't. Like most of our combo decks can grind you out, like Yawgmoth or like creativity, or they play like Teferi, I guess. But most of them like don't just go all in and just win and hope you don't have it. Is it because of Force of Negation and other stuff like that, where they actually have to be able to fight through counter magic, like free removal, 1-mana removal?
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it. Like Force of Negation is especially good against decks that need to resolve one specific sorcery, and like Past in Flames is very susceptible to just getting got by a force. So yeah, I think that is a big part of it.
Like, I think the value Storm doesn't win anymore. If you just do some stuff and, like, make 8 goblins, like, I don't think you can get there. I think they'll just, like, fly in with, like, 2 Murktide hits and you're done, right? So, yeah I think you gotta go all in.
Okay, here's an interesting one, Richard. Wild Nacatl. Wild Nacatl, at one point, literally banned in Modern. It was too good. They let it off the ban list. It came back and it's a 1-mana 3/3. It's a 1-mana 3/3 on turn 2 in the decks that would play it. It did see a lot of play in Zoo-style decks when it came back. Is a 1-mana 3/3 just not enough anymore? Like, is that the issue? Like, we live in a world where Ragavan, Dragon Rage Channeler, Giver of Runes, Esper Sentinel, like, all of our 1-drops are doing all these things. Is just being big not enough?
It's not big enough. It's like literally the same size as Dragon Rage Channeler.
So
it doesn't fly nor fill your graveyard. I mean, if you're gonna go here, what about Steplinks? Like, I don't know. These are like Curdy. These are boomer creatures, Seth. Like a 1-mana 3/3 is laughable.
I gotta find
it dies to red and 6 too, because you can't fetch up like, you might not be able to fetch up the right stuff before the red and 6 untaps. Or like the red 6 player plays their 2 lands, but I
wonder if I can find a zoo list from that era. It has to be so boomery, like Curdabe, Staplings, Nacatls. Yeah, and I guess it's also just not that fast anymore. Like, the idea of Zoo is like, oh, I'm gonna have this super fast clock by Steplinks, 2 fetch lands, it's a 4/5. Like, but that's not even really that fast, is it? Compared to Hammer Times and some of the things that we have going on now. So it's not even
your opponent plays Ledger Shredder and a Bobble, and they're like, cool, I block. like they don't gotta do anything, right?
So how big do you think it'd have to be? Like, vanilla 1-drop to see play in Modern? 4/4 5.
I don't think Zoo's happening anytime soon. But if you're like a 1-mana 5/5, maybe you see play.
You might have a chance. Okay.
Wow. Well, what does Goblin Guide have to be? But Goblin Guide's not on this list. Is Burn kind of viable?
I mean, Burn is still chugging along. I believe Goblin Guide is still good enough to make the cut in Burn. I think it's Goblin Guide and Swift Spear typically are the 2 creatures that actually make the cut. So I guess Goblin Guide's still fine.
Is Nacatl that much worse than Goblin Guide? I mean, Goblin Guide has haste.
But it does give your opponent lands.
Wait, don't we have a 1-mana 4/4? No, right?
not a pure one, I don't think. There's like Vexing Devil and some like Punishery style cards, but yeah, I don't think we just have
like
a straight up 1 mana 4/4.
Domain Zoo, I think, would be the modern zoo. And you have 2 mana 4/4s, like the Scion, but you need 3 lands to get that done. And then you have the 2 mana 4/4 that like loops.
Yeah, deck has like Territorial Kavu. So you actually have 2 like massive 2-drops. I guess occasionally that deck's actually not as good as I thought it would be. Like when they printed that stuff, I thought, wow, that's gonna be really strong. That is the one place where you do occasionally still see Nacatl. It usually shows up in that deck, like alongside Ragavan in the 1-drop slot, but that deck's not even a top tier deck, even with all those new additions. So I guess while Nacatl, it's not that it's like completely gone, but it's definitely a lot worse than it used to be. Okay, I got this one, Richard. Eldrazi. Not the big Eldrazi. People still Emrakul or whatever, do those shenanigans. But what about like Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher? And I know. We had the banning, we had Eldrazi Winter. But even after that, like, Eldrazi were a legit deck. Like, you're using Eldrazi Temple, casting your Thought-Knots and Reality Smashers. It's a mid-range archetype. It's got good creatures. It can kind of grind. Why don't we see Eldrazi anymore?
This is like a decent tier 2 deck, right? Eldrazi Tron. Not really because of Eldrazi, but because of Chalice. Like it's a Chalice deck, and then you play these Dirtles.
I guess, is it just like so Eldrazi Tron is still like a tier 2 deck that you see on occasion. Is it that
it's just too slow and fair to like actually keep up with the top decks?
So I guess
the problem is all Murktide. Right? Because you're like 3 mana 5/5. We're like, cool, 2 mana 8/8 flyer. Right? Like that's kind of the problem. Same with when Death Shadow was prevalent. You're like, whatever. I'm like, I cast 2 12/12s. Like, here you go, right? Like that's kind of the problem. You can't attack through anymore. And Thought-Knot Seer kind of sucks too. Like we'll talk about it shortly, but I think Thoughtseize sucks in 2023. Ooh. So like that power kind of goes down.
Oh, okay. Let's not talk about that shortly. Let's talk about that right now, because that one, to me, that's still a hot take. Thoughtseize sucking. What is your justification of that? What's your thinking?
There's nothing to Thoughtseize. Like this already started happening in like 2017 or something, where you look at their opponent's hand and you're like, I can't beat any of these cards. What do I take? I don't know, right? Like, what might I use 1 mana 2 life? So, like, you look at an Omnath deck, and they're like, Omnath, Renin 6, let's say they have Risen Reaper. Like, what are you taking? They're all, like, equally gross. You need to take them all. There's no perfect, like, 1 card to take. And that's not even counting things like you Thoughtseize Footfalls, where you're like, you have 8 Cyclers. Great. Like your win con isn't even here, right? So I can't even take anything. So I think Thoughtseize's been bad for a while. There's so much redundancy that it's not worth it. Like it used to be that decks relied on like 1 win con and had a bunch of filler cards, so you would rip that one thing. But now like every spell like will get you. So it's not even worth the 1 mana 2 life, and really the killer is the bad top decks later on, right? Like you could deal with like the little temple loss, right? But you're also eating the fact that you're going to top deck this later when you actually need a card. But there's nothing to take. Like, what do you take? Everything kills you.
I mean, that is a good point, that decks don't really have bad cards anymore. We're no longer in the Think Twice era where people are just playing bad filler cards because there's not enough good cards. I think it's also, so if you look at it as far as actual percentages, it was back in like 2015, one of the top 3 spells. Bolt Path, Thoughtseize, definitely top 5 pretty consistently. Today it is the 22nd, I think, or 21st most played non-creature spell. So again, not like it's gone, but that's a pretty huge fall from grace compared to where it used to be. So I think part of it is what you said, Richard. Like, decks are just so good that Thoughtseize, you're not able to just take that key card and your opponent's deck kind of crumbles anymore. Decks are too resilient for that. I think also part of it might be that there's just so much so much virtual card advantage built into decks now, where you have like all these ledger shredders, you have all these Renin sixes, stuff that isn't technically like draw a card, but stuff that is seasoned pyromancer that's generating card advantage or refilling your hand, that the idea that you're going to like keep your opponent from doing anything with this card, just, it doesn't work like it used to. In the past, you could like, remember the days of like him, I win, or like you double Thoughtseize someone and they got nothing going on. Like we see that now with even the scam decks. Like there's times when your opponent triple griefs you by the time you get to your second turn, and you're like, okay, like whatever, it's only a 3-2, I can deal with this, and you go on to like win the game. So I think that's part of it too. Decks are just, not only are they have better cards overall, the overall card quality is higher, they also just have so many ways to generate card advantage that, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe
the idea of forcing people to play off the top of their deck, like I think most people prefer that, right? So like, and then you are also doing that, but you have Thoughtseizes in your deck, so it like is really bad. Also, Crim's favorite card, Veil of Summer. Just like nixes like any chance of this being good. Like let's say you actually found a matchup where Thoughtseize is valuable, and then they Veil of Summer you and the game is over. That's like a 1-mana cryptic command at that point, right? So that also kind of didn't Thoughtseize.
So if you take Jun out for a spin, do you literally not run discard in it now?
I mean, you run it because you need to fill the thing for Tarmogoyf, but you're not happy about this.
You feel right? It feels bad.
You will side it out, and then you're like, what is the point of my deck? Because I don't even have enough sorceries in my deck. Like Tarmogoyf is like a 3/4 now. It's the reason Jun sucks is like every card in Jun like actually sucks. It's not like there's 1 or 2 bad cards that could like be propped up by the good cards. It's like the whole mess is like ineffective, right? Like, let's play on the top of my deck. You're gonna cast like Omnath into like Risen Reef into like 8 million cards. I'm gonna cast a Thoughtseize. Great, right? Like, it's...
hey, you could get a Dark Confidant and wait a turn and have it live and lose some life to draw a card. That's basically a Risen Reef, right? You got your own version.
But do you think Thoughtseize will come back?
I think Thoughtseize
is there a world where Thoughtseize is still good?
I think so. Like, I don't think it's impossible. You've mentioned a couple times that, like, right now we have a lot of like grindy mid-range decks and not a lot of pure combo decks. We have decks that have things that feel like combos but kind of play that can also play a fair game. If we ever get back to a world where you have a lot of pure combo decks that are relying on, you know, the one card, their Neobrand, to do Grishobrand shenanigans, or the Past in Flames to storm off, then I think Thoughtseize would go back up in value, right? I don't know if Modern will ever go back to that place, but that's the kind of meta where I think I would be excited to have Thoughtseize again.
I think we're done with that era of Magic.
Ooh,
I think
it's just
like glass cannon decks are no longer like everyone has such cheap and plentiful interactions and things that look like counter spells but are not counter spells, so that you can actually interact. That all the good decks will be able to grind you out. Like creativity can just side out the combo and play a control deck and like stuff you into the ground. So stuff like that will happen, and therefore when you're running these cards, it's not effective. So I think the time for glass cannon decks is gone, and everyone will be kind of like this, you know, if you go too hard at stopping my combo, I'll beat you the fairway. I think like most decks will be able to do that going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I gotta ask you about one more, and then we'll do a fish mail. So 2018, there was a big conversation about Jace the Mind Sculptor. Lots of people debating whether it should be unbanned, shouldn't be unbanned. People freaking out. The greatest planeswalker of all time, before Oko came around a few later. But this was a big thing, and a lot of people felt like we cannot unban Jace. Jace came. He's been in the format, and I was talking about this on Twitter a couple days ago, talking about Deathrite Shaman, and I said that Jace like basically is unplayed, and someone was like, no, is it Murktide plays a copy in the sideboard or something? And I was like, that's my point exactly. This is supposed to be the greatest planeswalker of all time, and it's reduced to maybe is it Murktide will play a one of copy in the sideboard. What happened to Jace? Like, how did Jace, the greatest planeswalker of all time, end up being fringe? Like, it's not that it sees zero play. Sometimes a one of shows up in a control deck or in the sideboard of a deck. But why isn't it a staple? Why isn't it good anymore, Richard?
I was in that camp. I thought with the unbanning of Jace, you would push out all mid-range decks. And that did happen, but not because of Jace, but because of Omnath or Oko, right? Like it's just there is another 4-mana threat that generates just as much value, or not just as much, but more value than Jace could ever hope to do. So then it just naturally pushes out all other mid-range decks, and currently that's Omnath. Like, you don't need to uptick your Planeswalker. You play a land, and you can play multiple lands a turn. So imagine if your Jace came with the ability to like uptick multiple times in a turn, right? And that's kind of Omnath, right?
Yeah. And then also Karn, I think, too. 4-mana Karn really changed things like that. That just like there's better options now for a lot of decks. You don't really need Jace. Jace only has 3 loyalty.
Bounce also doesn't do anything anymore. You're like, okay,
the bounce.
I dash in Ragavan, or okay, I'll just reuse my elemental. Make you get another Risen Reach trigger. Like I don't know, right? Like that bounce was not as funny as bouncing a Tarmogoyf back in the day, right?
Yeah, it was good against.
It's still good against Murktide.
Good against Tarmogoyf. Murktide, if you can resolve it.
Good luck resolving your 4-drop, right?
Yeah. Oh, what a world. So Richard, I think that covers most of our big cards. Any other thoughts on any of this? Cards, modern? Okay. Will any of these come back?
Lord of the Rings, I want to know, one card I want to know, which seems like perfectly viable, which is Remand. And we're getting white Remand with Lord of the Rings. Is this what we need? We need to color shift Remand? What happened to Remand? Why do we no longer play Remand?
I think it's even funny because it lines up pretty well against Cascade decks, right? You can remand the Living End or the Rhinos, and they like
that's hilarious, right?
You remand, they exile all the cards, so it even seems like it lines up very well with the meta. Is it just that there's better options now? Like, we got literal counterspell, so everyone plays that instead of Remand. We got Archmage's Charm, so that occasionally shows up. Like, did counterspell just kill Remand? Like, why bounce it back to the hand? Like, especially if you don't have Snapcasters to do your, like, that was like the build your own Omnath, or build your own grindy deck back in the day, like Snapcaster, Remand, Snapcaster, keep drawing those cards. I think it's as simple as that. Like, why Remand if you can counterspell?
You draw a card. Because I think the idea is you Remand, draw a card, and then do your combo, right? So Splitter Twin would love this because they would then Splitter Twin, or Mono Blue Tron. They would then Mindslaver lock you after doing this.
But
you can't do that anymore, so there's no point. They just replay. Like, you just all took a turn off and just replayed your land, and then that was... or replayed your card, and like that was that. So there's no point to it.
And the format's gotten, we talked about this earlier, just like more efficient too. And the cheaper the cards are, the less impactful Remand is. You're like, oh, Ragavan, and you Remand it, and you're just like, oh, one more mana recast my Ragavan. Like, okay, good job. Like, so I feel like the fact that the format's just gotten more efficient in general has like made the impact of a card like Remand a lot less good. Like, the dream is your opponent spends 4 mana on their Huntmaster, or they're a Johnny Vengeance or something, and you're like, haha, Remand it, draw a card, look at all the tempo I gained. But that kind of falls apart if a lot of decks are actually playing, cheaper threats. Plus, then you also have like Veil of Summers. You have Teferi, so I think counter spells in general have gotten a little bit riskier as a plan. So I guess it's probably just all those things. Counterspell existing, more counter hate existing, more efficient format. I do think the white Remand has a chance, though. Like, I think being white really improves it. Because I think that blue has so many other options in a white deck that doesn't have blue. Then you have the surprise value, and you're not directly competing with counterspell. So I think maybe the white Remand will actually, not that it'll go back to the glory days. Remand was another.
Like, who's gonna cast it? Attacks. Like, Tax can't even cast it.
Yeah. I guess tallying yourself.
Like, is Omnath gonna play this or something? Like, is our Solitude deck's gonna play this?
Maybe some of the white, like, Solitude or mono white human style decks. Actually, even then, like,
mono white human, but then your Thalia's like hurting this.
Yeah, Thalia kind of wrecks you. Maybe there's just a full-on mono white, like, Mana Tithe into the new Remand, into Lapse of Certainty.
Yes, this is clearly
top tier. Broke it. We broke it.
Soul Sisters
Well,
is the answer, Seth. Soul Sisters.
Oh, I would play that in Soul Sisters so quick. Anyway, everyone, I think that brings us to the end of our discussion of cards that used to be good in Modern. I'd love to hear what y'all think, though, about these cards. Any of the cards we talked about, what's your thinking on why those cards don't show up? How has Modern changed, in your opinion? Also, this isn't a conclusive list. I'm sure you can come up with some other good options. So what cards did you used to love in Modern and play all the time in Modern that you just really can't play competitively anymore? Let us know about that in the comments as well. Richard, do we have time for a fish mail? Can we sneak in one? Where are we at?
All right.
A quick one.
If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail. We'll get to your questions on air. Kylio Meters. With everything going on lately, is there any non-Twitter social media that Goldfish is active on? I'd like to keep following after the inevitable collapse. Seth, are you on any non-Twitter social platforms?
I have an Instagram, but it is not very active. I created it, but I haven't really done much with it. I've seen a bunch of people suggest Mastodon, and there's like a ton of like Twitter replacements that are trying to do the same thing. I think I snagged a couple of random accounts with my username just in case they ever became a thing, but I don't use any of those actively either. What about Goldfish?
Yeah, the problem. So we have like TikTok accounts and Instagram accounts and things like that, but our main, I guess, like texting social media would be Twitter. It's just Twitter's not actually dead. Like maybe it's dying, but it's still like way more alive than all the other platforms. So there's like no point on going over there until everyone else goes over there. And everyone else is doing the same thing, so no one is going there. So like Twitter actually needs to fall over, and then everyone will move, and then that's when we'll move. But the problem is we're supposed to be there to reach everyone, to reach all our fans and whatnot. And if everyone is on Twitter and not on insert new Twitter killer, it doesn't help. I will say that, our new overlord has started. Our Twitter account got like banned over the weekend. they finally switched. So you know how they had that whole thing where you got to pay for tweets and stuff now.
Oh yeah.
They finally started enforcing it. They actually banned our account temporarily, but we got that back. I think it's working. But they are starting to do the things that they were saying they were going to do. So we'll see if people actually migrate off of Twitter. But currently, that's where everyone is. I saw like some like NPR and stuff were like getting off Twitter. So maybe
it'll actually change.
Does something, but really, it's like everyone's just waiting for everyone else. And if someone does something, then everyone else goes. But until then, that's where we are.
Yeah, I've looked at a couple of replacements, and there's like tens of people on there, so there's just not enough to really make the switch worth it.
This happens all the time. Remember when Twitch, you're like, Twitch sucks, let's go to Mixer or something. I don't know, whatever. Like random, but like okay, but everyone has to go, otherwise it doesn't work, right? Or like, Reddit is terrible now. Like, let's go somewhere else, and it usually doesn't happen, but sometimes it does. Remember Dig? Any boomers out there? Remember the old Reddit? Before Reddit was a thing, it was Dig, right? That everyone went to and like Slashdot or whatever. Like there's MySpace. Yeah. So it does happen once in a while. So yeah, if we go anywhere, you'll follow our Twitter.
We'll let you know
on our Twitter if we're going anywhere. So thank you for your question. If you have any future questions, send it to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 429 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about our first impressions, A March of the Machines, and whatever else goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have a lovely week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.